I've had probably 30 years of interfacing with Iran since the beginning of the revolution, and some interfacing was even too close for comfort, as some of you may know. What is in the old story of the last 30 years, there are two dimensions I find very curious. One is that, to the best of my knowledge, and my knowledge is limited, as you know, Iran, as the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the West, mainly 90% the US, have had so far, to my counting, 12 set of negotiations on different issues. 12. In many of them I was frontally involved, in others I was marginally involved, in others I was mentioned about it by the Americans and the Iranians who were involved directly. So 12 set of negotiations. I'd like to challenge all of you here. Of this 12 negotiations that I know of, I'm sure there are many more because I don't know everything. Do you know how many were actually successful? 11. 11, completely successful for us, by the way. And it had been also successful from the other side because they were accepted. This dimension has never been recalled by anybody because it is perhaps inconvenient. But then there is another dimension which bothers me in a way. It is more part of what I call the narrative. You and I know that unless we enter the individual narrative of the people we are talking to, there is no way of negotiating with Iran. That's only an idiot can say that. There is a way of negotiating with the person that is in front of you from Iran at that moment in time. And we know this because I've psychoanalyzed myself for 60 years. I know how it works. You talk to me as if I was an Italian because my name is Italian. You'll never come through to me. I'm a son of the Iron Curtain. I was born within seeing distance of the Iron Curtain. Psychologically, that was the way when I was a child I was born. My narrative remains that. If you don't get that, I don't really care what is about Rome, a capital I never lived in, I never frequent, I don't even know what they are, and there's nothing to share with me. With the Iranian side, I had a good fortune of negotiating face-to-face with Rafsanjani, as some of you know, and face-to-face, and this many less people will know, with Khatami. Now, President Rafsanjani was great fun to negotiate with. Why? Because he is a very astute merchant. It's not a pejorative, it's a wonderful, as long as you know what is his stake. You could not have negotiated with President Khatami if you were not a little bit familiar with Locke and Hume, Descartes and Hegel, and to the merit of President Khatami, if you did not know the philosophy of a non-so-famous Islamic personage by the name of Henry Kissinger. We reached an agreement on a suggestion that he put forward, citing Henry Kissinger, 1975, with the Vietnamese. That is what the narrative is. That would have. Now, we have 12 negotiations that I can report to you in writing. In fact, they will appear in my next book in London at the end, during the summer, listed one by one. Imagine the more ones that existed. I don't know. How can I know this? After all, I'm just coming from the Eastern Alps. What do we know? We're a small tribe. We don't know anything. But the other aspect which bothers me is on a different dimension which has never been used. Now, we all know about 53. I'm sorry, but even too much we know about 53, right? Why we in this country don't we mention 46 and 47? The Iranians know that in 1946 and 47, without UK and US intervention, the Soviet Union would have kept the occupation of the northern part of Iran for a long time. So, a bit of propaganda, guys. It's a good propaganda because of the truth. Did we do something about it? Did we ever mention something about that? You know, we never did. And this is, I think, a fundamental element. I mean, if I was an Iranian, I would say, why don't we say, we remember that the West did something in 46 that nobody else did. It's part of the story. So, the last thing, and I'm sorry if I talk too much, the last point is the following, in my view. We've made a tremendous step forward. Thanks God, conflict resolution has gone from multilateralism to minilateralism. Yes, I worked for a long time for the UN in the old times, but multilateralism cannot work in conflict resolution. It has not done anything for the last 20 years. Because everything we've done well in this world, in terms of conflict resolution or tensions, in the last 20 years has been the result of minilateralism. Now, I was always a bit mad. Imagine, in 1996, I wrote a piece in London suggesting that the Security Council of the UN should be reduced to number 6, not enlarged to 15 or 20 or to 25 or 30, like somebody from a little country, the capital of which is Rome, was running around like a chicken without head, asking for. Conflict resolution is coming down to unilateral at best. So the road towards bilateral negotiation between Iran and the US is now a part of what is happening as the role of the wheel of history is rolling. It's then going that direction, not in the opposite. So I think it's going to come in that way. But for God's sake, let's look also at what has been achieved during those last 30 years in different ways between these two countries. And a bit of history, as I mentioned before to Professor Bully, may not be so bad. May not be so bad also in this country. I mean, I had a very good conversation with an Iranian in 2005, and this gentleman, who's remained unnamed for obvious reasons, as you will understand in a second, said to me, Johnny, I don't understand. I don't understand how we can explain this to the Iranian population, what has happened. Because if we are too explicit, we may get into trouble. What is the trouble? When the US went into Iraq, they allowed us to vindicate 1534, which of course we all know what it is, but I'm not so sure that if you walk in the streets here, somebody will remember what it was. Of course, I'm very old, so I was there, so I remember. 1534, Suleiman I conquered Baghdad, and the Shias go majority to Persia, and a small group, as we know, to South Lebanon, and the Sunni take over. So now, this gentleman from Iran tells me, with your kind, very generous American government, you ask us no blood, no money, but you gave us back Baghdad. 1534. I said, wait a minute. We are now in the era of negotiation, of democracy. So you cannot say just because you're taking over, that you can stay there forever. Say, you're right, you're right. So let me see, a small calculation, he said. Well, okay, so after 1534, I think the same minority was in power for 5 centuries. We can change in 2 centuries. Now, this may seem to be a joke.
Let's give Ambassador Miller.
Right, this is a joke, but it's not a joke. I mean, there is a little bit, I think, time has come to have a little bit of reflection and say, every time we speak about US-Iran, it's always war, war, war. No, we have had very useful negotiation. They have worked. They have worked. I mean, I know this on my skin, right? Am I alive? How many people have been blindfolded and taken hostage in Lebanon, in Beirut, to free American hostages? As far as I know, I was the only one. But I survived. Why? Because I made a deal with President Rafsanjani beforehand. Not that that excluded the deal I had to make with Hezbollah, which was another one, and then with Israel, and then with the Germans, and blah, blah. But they kept their word. And if I can tell you one thing to all of you, please, there is nothing worse than to be blindfolded, taken away with no knowledge what you are, and locked up in the back of a car. Don't do it. That's not a good negotiating tactic. Thank you.
Johnny Pico, for those of you who don't know, was a major reason why the Iran-Iraq war ended. He played a major role in the negotiations by his skill and his patient work with his Iranian counterparts, who were also of outstanding skill. I think we have a critical mass now of people who could do the job if they were allowed to do it. Certainly the experience that we've had jointly over the past 35 years has produced a register of people who know each other. A perfect example is the present foreign minister of Iran, who knows the United States. He was a student here, He has a PhD in the physics of nuclear power plants from MIT. He has been in charge of the Iranian nuclear program. Is a major figure in Iranian politics. He has met with counterparts, technical and scientific counterparts. They know each other well, and they've discussed all of the parameters, all of the